Good afternoon and welcome to the Value Economics Show. Happy Monday. On August 17th, 2007, the funniest movie of all time, Superbad, premiered in theaters. In what would be defined as one of the last great theatrical releases of a comedy before political correctness and wokeism hijacked comedy films, Superbad became nearly an instant classic. It's one of the easiest movies you can ever watch, and still dominates in streaming charts to this day, almost 2 decades later. There are many reasons as to why Superbad became the smash hit that it did. The overwhelming reason, in my view, was its relatability and simplicity. For the uninitiated, the plot of Superbad is very basic. 2 high school seniors, played by Michael Cera and Jonah Hill, and based on the film's creators Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, all in their major film debuts, want to close out their high school careers as all 18-year-old men do, by drinking, partying, and sleeping with the hottest women they can before college. The 2 are set to go their separate ways, lifelong friends who have done everything together, soon to be torn apart. On one of the last days of school, a golden opportunity arises. Hill's character's crush, played by Emma Stone, announces that her parents are out of town and that she'll be throwing a party. The only problem? She doesn't have a fake ID, cutting off the spigot of alcohol for the party. The 2, plus their third wheel friend, played by Christopher Mintz-Plasse, volunteer immediately and set off on a day's journey to procure a fake ID to be the heroes of the evening. Word spreads. Anticipation for the party grows. The only problem? The 3 have no means of getting a fake ID. The 2 friends shove Mintz-Plasse into action early, who ordered a fake for college. He gets it just in the nick of time, but with a major hang-up. He only has one name, a name that will go down in infamy. McLovin. The 3 begin to panic, their dreams of boozing, partying, and sex with their high school crushes, Sarah's and Mintz-Plasse's included, seemingly going down the tubes. Regardless of the unideal circumstances, the 3 spring into action, setting off the rest of the film, which quickly descends into about 90 minutes of completely hilarious and unhinged chaos. Looking back on it, it's hard to overstate just how consequential Superbad turned out to be. It was the debut film of Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, a tandem that would dominate the next decade of comedic filmmaking. It launched the mainstream film careers of Hill, Cera, Emma Stone, Mintz-Plasse, and Bill Hader. The amount of iconic lines and memes that will live in the cultural lexicon forever are almost impossible to count. The film was a giant, and still remains as such to this day. I make plans to watch it at least once a year, and as someone as critical of a film as I am, can tell you with all the honesty and sincerity that I can muster, it still holds up. But with something like Superbad, as with all things, it begs a question. Why? Why exactly does it hold up? Well, for starters, all the reason that I just mentioned. The legacy of the film, at least initially, must be based on the film itself. For all the noise that surrounds a film as it debuts, if the film itself is trash, none of it matters. Just ask anyone at Disney how their latest stretch of films, the latest phase of the MCU, is doing, for example. Superbad undoubtedly had that on lock. But that's not enough. There's always that any film that stands the test of time has to be something that keeps it sewn into the identity of the culture at the time. There are a lot of films that get made that are good, but are worth $15 tickets in tickets at the movie theater. But Superbad was an anomaly even then, particularly due to the lack of evident star power and the powerhouse budgets that were slowly beginning to define cinema. Superbad, all else being equal, shouldn't have worked. But it did work, and massively at that. So there's something else going on here, something that was bubbling underneath the surface that not even the people most responsible for the film's success knew at the time. I would argue that even now, a lot of people still don't know the answer. But after much more thought and pondering than any rational or sane person would do, I believe I've cracked the code. My answer as to why Superbad was so culturally impactful and powerful is actually quite simple. It completely inverted the cultural norms of not only films, but our society at large. Now, this is a very bold claim to make. You're seriously telling me that a low-budget comedy about 2 geeks trying to get drunk and laid changed the entire landscape of Hollywood? That it changed the way that movies are cast, produced, and written? That it allowed for the mashed rewiring of audiences to make this new way of filmmaking socially acceptable and palatable? You're out of your mind. There's no way. And I'm not shying away from these initial critiques at all. But neither am I shying away from my claim, and let's dig into why. Let's start from the basics. For almost the entirety of the history of cinema, there was almost no more important variable for a film's success to get right than the casting of the lead. Usually male, this creative choice had to hit, and hit immediately. What did people look for in a male lead exactly? Well, throughout history, they looked for the traditional roles and values of a masculine man. Tough, resilient, rugged, and handsome. Someone who could shoot a gun and rip a bad guy apart with his bare hands while simultaneously saving an outrageously hot damsel in distress from the director's chosen flavor of peril. This was true up until 2007, proven with the release of films like No Country for Old Men and Transformers, for example. Superbad, to put it mildly, did not follow this playbook at all. Instead of a Sean Connery, Clark Gable, or John Wayne, or even a modern leading man type like Christian Bale, Leonardo DiCaprio, or Chris Hemsworth, they cast Michael Cera and Jonah Hill. The combined star power of the two was so lackluster that they needed two, and arguably three if you count Mintz-Plasse, to carry the load. And it didn't stop there. Hill was in his first of many fat phases. Cera had maybe 2 pounds of muscle on his entire frame. Mintz-Plasse certainly had less. They all had baby faces, and 2 of them had white afros. They weren't impressive from a traditional Hollywood leading man standpoint at all. They were average, awkward, normal, and weird. Even for a comedy, this would have been a death sentence right from the jump. But it wasn't. Instead, Superbad struck a chord on a different angle. The angle they struck, with the casting of Cera and Hill, both of whom's careers took off like a rocket after the film's release, was not one of aspiration, but one of relatability. Very few people had anything close to resembling what Bale, DiCaprio, or Hemsworth had. But almost everyone had what Cera and Hill had. An awkward phase, a girl they liked that was far too out of their league, and a way into the cool kids club by making a fool out of themselves while doing so. Put simply, when people saw Superbad, they saw themselves. The cherry on top of the success and sustained cultural relevance of Superbad was the ending. In real life, most people fell on their faces while trying to do anything close to what the leads in Superbad attempted to do. But in the film, they didn't. Remarkably, Cera and Hill won. They got their respective girls. They kept their friendship intact. They were the heroes of their high school experience. They got beer and got laid. The story didn't end how it typically would, with a star quarterback dunking their head in a toilet or shoving them in a locker for even making the attempt. Instead, the opposite happened. The unthinkable happened. They won. In doing this, Superbad empowered a group of people that had never before been empowered to a degree they had before in a film as big as this one was. It spoke to a group of marginalized people that had never been spoken for before. It spoke to a group of people, one that was much larger than most anticipated it being, that was done with having their heads dunked in the toilet and shoved into lockers. One that was done with being the low man on the totem pole. One that was fed up with not getting the girl, saving the day, and being the butt of every joke. It was that decision that changed everything. And it was that group that would begin to, for the first time in history, be at the top of the cultural totem pole. Nerds. The biggest impact that Superbad had culturally was the solidification of the rise of what I've dubbed our modern nerd class. Never before had nerds been platformed in a way that was this empowering, this relevant. Now, to be a nerd, to be a beta, to be a quote non-traditional male was cool and all the rage. Superbad was simply the trailblazer, the Jackie Robinson, the Caitlin Clark, for an all-new and ever-expanding world of both nerd-centered, non-traditional masculine values. Don't believe me? Look at some of the films that came immediately on the heels of the release of Superbad. The Social Network, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, starring Michael Cera, and others. Additionally, alongside Superbad, rode 2 massive cultural shifts, one that America had not experienced in more than 60 years. Wokeism, and all that came with it. Wokeism, put plainly, is a war on traditional values. The open assault on everything that had traditionally provided stable sources of value and worth in American life, community, the family, religious faith, etc., were replaced by sources of divisive identity groups based on gender, race, and sexual orientation, among others. The second cultural shift that happened was the rise of so-called, quote, toxic masculinity. The Me Too movement, once a noble enterprise for calling out abuse in elite circles that had gone on for far too long, soon turned into a man-hating witch hunt that opportunistic women used as a weapon to beat men they didn't like into submission. Radicalized versions of feminism began to go mainstream, with simple glances at men by women at gyms to guys asking women out at church being blasted and lampooned across social media. At the center of the target board for both the Me Too and woke movements was one group: men. Traditional masculinity in men served as cannon fodder for anything wrong with society. Men, for the first time ever, were thrown into the middle of the ocean to drown. Some of this, as mentioned, was warranted. Opportunity should be open for all groups of people, no matter who they are. Some men are, indeed, toxic. But one group was able to escape this cultural raising, and by extension, to elevate their status in the eyes of both women and the culture at large. the same group that was empowered by Superbad to finally ascend to the top of the status hierarchy. Nerds. Thus, the societal revenge of the nerds campaign was born. Using this lapse in tradition, our nerd class did what anyone would do, rose up and took advantage. Using the toxic masculinity and wokeism trends as a veneer, our nerds slowly but surely took their place at the top of American society. No one had cared about them before, and in a bizarre twist of irony, no one seemed to care about them now. But we should have. As the old saying goes, hell hath no fury like a woman or nerd scorned. They do not forget easily, if at all. Our nerds certainly didn't. Having long been left on the sidelines of the most important conversations in our country, they now took center stage, worming their way in by dictating decisions about the most important cultural conversations not by virtue or what the society valued, but because of their quote-unquote superior forms of reasoning. As soon as this happened, our nerd class began to wage their own war on American tradition by using one primary vehicle, elitism, quote-unquote, or expertise. The traditional path to those two rare things closed up until this moment. Our nerd class was now able to fully take the reins, crafting an entire new narrative where it had never been before. But we must ask, has this made us better as a society or worse? Let's take a look at some of the results. Contrary to popular belief, the 2008 financial crisis, the greatest economic catastrophe of the last century, was not caused by purely greedy bankers and broy Wall Street investment types. Instead, it was caused by quantitative analysts who got a bit too trigger-happy with their math equations. Our neocon foreign policy class in Washington were not informed to bomb the Middle East to smithereens, nor a neoliberal economic class by outsourcing factory jobs to Bangladesh by simpleton blowhards. Instead, it was caused by a small set of think tanks run by overzealous Georgetown political science majors. It was not quote-unquote body shaming by men and women who like to go to the gym more than average that caused Americans to become the fattest and sickest developed country in the world. Instead, they were incentivized to by people who were too lazy to eat a salad and walk on a treadmill and outsource their bodily autonomy and sovereignty to a pill or vaccine instead. It was not the artist in Hollywood who decided a jihadist Snow White would make for the latest smash hit Disney film. Instead, it was our nerds, the ones who thought they could finally invert themselves from being the butt of the joke by enforcing their garbage and tripe on their own consumer base. The same could be said by the same company taking Thor, the most observably masculine hero in the Avengers universe, and making an example out of him by turning him into a drunken and obese buffoon at the first sight of failure. The entire NBA is now based on three-pointers and layups. Anything else to the analytics dorks that run their front office is a distraction. Hell, my football team, the Cleveland Browns, drafted a 5'11" noodle-armed quarterback in the third round above Shedeur Sanders, a prospect far more qualified to be drafted ahead of him due to our quote-unquote chief strategy officer, Paul DePodesta, a baseball executive, pulling the strings. But that's neither here nor there. For the last 30 years, 20 of them being defined by the Superbad era, our nerd class has waged a reign of terror on our world, unlike anything we've ever seen before, from a cosmetic perspective, if nothing else. It is they who bear the responsibility for much of the catastrophe and disaster that has defined the hollowing out of our country. For all the blame that toxic masculinity and wokeism deserve for the emasculation of our country, and trust me, there's plenty of it to go around, our nerds, dare I say, deserve more. But that nerd class is failing. In their series in the Book of Exodus, Christian iconographer and nerd can't seem to get away from it, Jonathan Pageau coined a term called the Pageauian fringe. The theory states that the fringe of anything, when elevated, will ultimately collapse under its own unseriousness, given enough stress and time under tension. The fringe, being on the outskirts of whatever thing is being discussed, is there for a reason. It was never meant to be the centerpiece of anything. When it tries to swap roles with whatever is, bad things happen, often in catastrophic fashion. The problem with elevating the fringe, and in this case our nerd class, is that at the end of the day, they cannot rise to the occasion when tradition demands that they do. As Douglas Murray, who we'll talk about in a second, has eloquently stated, you can demand all the standards for blue-haired, Islamist, non-binary people in civil engineering jobs all you want. But at the end of the day, the bridges have to stay up. If they don't, people don't care who you are or what your identity is. Fix the bridge, and fix it now. And that's exactly the buzzsaw our nerd class has run into. They can't fix the bridge. They can draw up a blueprint. They can run an AI model to time-lapse its construction. They can 3D print a design. But they've never gone near anywhere to actually turning a wrench. They'd burn down their room temperature office if they even made an attempt to wield a blowtorch. They don't even know what a construction foreman is, much less how to hold a conversation with one without totally wetting themselves in the process. Colin Cowherd, going back to our basketball analogy, has coined a great term that needs far more popularity than it's gotten: man-alytics. Take the series between the New York Knicks, who have no discernible or innate talent, who just beat the Boston Celtics, a far more talented team, in 6 games. The star of the Celtics, Jason Tatum, Achilles injury aside, by the way, is leather loafers, according to Cowherd. The star of the New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson, is a pair of worn work boots. The same conundrum holds true across the domains you've discussed. No matter how great Michael Cera and Jonah Hill are, they'll never be true leading men in Hollywood. Math is great, but you definitely want to consult an actual financial professional first before making your latest investment. No matter how well-informed your military intelligence is, it's still the men with boots on the ground that have to get the job done. You can take all the supplements you want, but at the end of the day, diet and exercise will always reign supreme. No matter how cool Steph Curry hitting a three-pointer is, it doesn't compare to a game-winning mid-range jumper from Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. The people who the Browns elevated Paul DePodesta to was replaced by a man by the name of John Dorsey, who just architected one of the most amazing franchise roster turnarounds in history with the Detroit Lions. Our nerds have gotten out of control. It's high time that we, politely and respectfully of course, remind them of their place and shove them back in their lockers. We're going to be spending today's show talking about how this has happened and how it's manifesting itself in all areas of our culture. Our goal is to not say that their contributions are worthless, because they aren't. All people have worth. All voices should be heard. But there also needs to be something that stands above all when the chips are down. What actually works. What actually moves the needle to get things done. That thing, proven over and over again, is time-tested tradition. The thing that you can't map out in a spreadsheet or measure in a lab. We've gotten too far away from that in recent years. It's time we steer back towards the things that we know best. Whenever something dies, something comes to replace it. Whether that's something that's designed by us or designed by the culture broadly is up to us. I believe that with the fall of our nerd class, value-driven people have a great opportunity to reassert themselves into the fray in ways that are beneficial for everyone. We don't get chances like this very often. It's my suggestion and my hope that we decide to swing big. Now let's get into our talking points. I tweaked my back this morning in boxing, so I'm a little bit stiff today. So my apologies about that. So let's talk about Douglas Murray. So Douglas Murray, who I love, by the way, or I maybe used to love. I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of his anymore. But anyway, so this Douglas Murray and Dave Smith debate on Rogan, I've been waiting to talk about it for a while, and I think it's actually appropriate for given the subject matter we're talking about today, because I believe, and Dave Smith went on his podcast after he did this debate and said it's going to be the biggest thing that he ever does. And I like Dave Smith personally, just like I like Douglas Murray. And I don't want it to be the biggest thing that Dave does. I want Dave to do well. But I do think that this is going to be what Dave Smith is going to be remembered for at the end of the day. Not only will I think it probably is going to be the defining thing for both Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, sad to say, not so Rogan, but for the two of those guys, I think it's definitely going to be the thing they're remembered for the most. I believe, and if you haven't watched the debate, I would highly recommend going back and watching it, even if you don't have an opinion on Israel or Gaza or foreign policy or whatever you want to talk about. I believe not only will this go down as the most defining debate of their careers, respectively, I think this is going to go down as the defining debate of the end of the elite era in our culture, of the nerd era in our culture. And it came from an unusually ironic place, because you have to understand this, because before Douglas Murray kind of got caught up in the whole Israel fanatic phase. And there are people that are fanatic for Gaza as well. I'm not really a big fan of those folks. I'm not a fan of fanatics generally. But actually, that's not true. But in this situation, I just think everything involved is so terrible that I just think anyone cheerleading either side of it, really the radical, like the Rachel Zegler people, who I love, by the way, is the most entitled, the most American person in America right now is Rachel Zegler. We'll talk about her maybe in another episode. But who I actually like, by the way. She was great in West Side Story. But Murray has been long thought by many, myself included, to be a phenomenal cultural critic. I think Douglas Murray has been one of the people who has most shaped my line of thinking about a lot of issues, including as a defender of values and a defender of common sense. But he was exposed in this debate with Dave Smith, and we're going to get into why in a second. But he was exposed when a true person of that breed and of his caliber, which is Dave Smith, debated him on the show. Because Douglas Murray, even though he has like, he's like the smart British guy, right? That's kind of what he's known for. He's kind of like Christopher Hitchens in that way. And Dave Smith is kind of like a bare knuckle brawler, like a Brooklyn. I think he's from Brooklyn. He's definitely from New York, but a New York guy who just puts on brass knuckles and just beats the tar out of people. Like he did it with Chris Cuomo. He's done it with so many other people. And Dave just doesn't give a shit about who Douglas Murray is or had anybody else. He has his opinions and his convictions and a lot of facts on his side, and he just goes after people. And so that's essentially what happened, was that, Douglas tried to be, again, like the smart British guy, whatever, and then just every chance he got, just Dave Smith just threw him through a wall the entire time, or dunked his head in the toilet, to use the nerd analogy, whatever. And so many people have pointed out multiple things about this debate. There are so many sound bites that have gone viral from this, but the obvious one, which is where Rogan and then who is the other one? Rogan, Tim Dillon did it, and then Tucker Carlson, when Dave Smith went on Tucker's podcast, talked about this, but it's the "you haven't been here" point. You have never been to Israel. You've never been to Gaza. All those things. Jason Whitlock did this as well. You've never been there. Let's say bean, like, green beans. You've never been to Israel. You've never been to Gaza. And the Gaza, the whole like lengthening out of the vowels thing. And so people point to that as the point where the debate went off the rails, and where Douglas Murray kind of just descended into kind of clownery, lampoonery, whatever you want to call it. And that's a fair point. That's a very, very fair point, which I think it's very, very valid of criticism from that sense. However, I believe the most defining moment of the debate was not that moment. It was really two things. It was the first part of the debate, and I think something at the very end of the debate. And I want to talk about the first part first. So the most defining part of the debate, I think the one that framed the rest of us and that gets into the "you haven't been here before" point, and then the later point I'm going to talk about, is the first part of it. And so, again, for those who haven't seen it, Rogan kind of opens up and he's like, "Look, I really respect you guys a lot. He's had Douglas Murray on the show 3 times before this. He's had Dave a bunch, because, and they're all friends. I don't know if Douglas is really friends with Rogan now, but, who knows? But he's basically like, look, I respect both of you guys a lot. I think you guys are both very smart people, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion today." And Dave is like, "Yeah, like, I'm looking forward to it, whatever." And then Douglas just goes and just really like lays into both Rogan and Dave Smith and kind of just lectured them on saying like, you haven't had really a balanced side of this debate on everything. And a balanced side, quote unquote, meaning i.e. one that defended the pro-Israel take. And he kind of just really just unloaded on the two of them from the jump. Like he attacked the moderator, which you're never supposed to do, because Rogan has an opinion, but Rogan wanted to moderate this discussion between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray, because I think people were kind of sick of the people pot-shotting each other without an actual dialogue on a major platform, which is what I think that Rogan wanted to do. And so, again, this is kind of where everything turned hostile in that way. And then, so he goes out on offense. And he spends like the first 10 minutes just making himself sound like the most unlikable, the most like, again, not, like condescending. Like it was a awful, awful look for Douglas Murray to just lecture Joe Rogan, lecture Dave Smith on how like they don't, I don't even know, he like sounded, I don't even like, I'm not annoyed to even have this discussion. And then he threw out like, Daryl Cooper, who is a historian, who is kind of he's not like a classically trained historian, quote unquote. I should say that, because maybe Douglas Murray will watch this and he's like, oh, he's not a historian, whatever. And then, so they go through the debate. There's the "you haven't been here." There's the whole punching jelly argument, like you're not an expert, whatever. And so this I thought was the most revealing point. And so Dave Smith, I forget, I'm paraphrasing, so for someone correct me if I'm getting the exact quote wrong. But Dave used the word slaughter to describe, Israel is dropping bombs on Gaza and slaughtering children or something like that. And then as soon as Dave used the word slaughter, Douglas Murray perked up and he took exception to that. And then so he's like, well, they're not slaughtering the children of Gaza. And Dave is like, okay, well, what would you, like, it's like, okay, fine, they're killing people. It's like, what would you even say then? He's like, well, they're just casualties in a war. And so I'm like, okay, that's a bit bizarre. And that's not a valid point at all. So slaughter, kill, murder, annihilate, whatever you want to use. It's the same thing. Dave Smith was saying that Israel is dropping bombs on Gaza and killing children, which is happening. There's video on it. There's evidence across the world that that is happening, across any platform you want. Just look it up. And I've seen way too many videos than I would care to see on that. I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And so Douglas had no valid point to replace that word with anything logical, which is very, very telling, because if he used the same debate or the same language, on the other side of the debate, it would not undermine his argument. He would have the same zealousness that Dave Smith had on his side of the argument. And so, again, it's this kind of condescending, I'm smarter than you, so shut up, you can't have an opinion type of thing. It's ridiculous. And so, there was a ton of fallout after this debate. There were a lot of people who thought that, including myself, that Dave Smith kind of crushed Douglas Murray, and and I thought Douglas had some fine points to raise, but he just came off like such a jerk, and he came off like such an asshole that I couldn't find a lane to defend him in. I just couldn't do it. And so what I think that a lot of people saw, and I think the person that I went to afterwards was Jason Whitlock. So Jason Whitlock did a podcast in the aftermath of the Murray-Smith debate as kind of a post-mortem. And I thought the Jason Whitlock podcast, which everyone should go listen to, he talked about Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Dave Smith, Douglas Murray, all these people, and tied it all together. And so I thought that it was the most accurate distilling of what actually happened during the debate. And so what Jason said was that he stated that Murray's condescension and elitism, both of which are debased from Christianity, which is the whole point of his show, which is why, again, Douglas Murray is one of the people I called out for being an atheistic conservative. This is why being an atheistic conservative is pointless, because it exposes the expert class for what they are. They're just shills and slaves to their own intellect. They have nothing to offer outside of their own quote-unquote intelligence, which, to Jason's point, being debased from a higher morality, i.e. killing kids is wrong, i.e. attacking the moderator of the debate to start out a debate is wrong. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you don't have the morality and peace intact, if you're only defending your position and not a higher authority of some way, you're going to descend into elitism, into condescension, which is the whole crux of what all of this is built on. These are all the quote-unquote smart people, the expert class, quote-unquote. And Dave had a great point in terms of, Douglas said, he's like, you get more experts in the room. And he's like, well, the experts told me to get 17 vaccines for COVID. And he's like, I know that the experts are not all this, but you need more experts for this scenario. And he's like, well, the foreign policy experts are the reason we bombed Iraq. And he's like, well, that's not the same thing. And it's like, okay. And so, again, it was this circular, ridiculous, it was so, honestly, it got infuriating to listen to after a while, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going nowhere, it's pointless, whatever. And so, intelligence debased from morality is stupid. Intelligence debased from morality is not intelligence at all, because it's not wisdom. Wisdom should be valued at a higher point than intelligence, which is why all of the experts, all of the nerds like Douglas Murray, and all the elitists out there are falling out of taste and out of favor across all realms of intellect. And elitism that is, what do I want to say here? Elitism is selling out in midair. It's just done. I think the world is kind of done with the whole expert class, elite class thing. I think COVID was a big canary in the coal mine to this. I think the Douglas Murray-Dave Smith debate is a big indicator of this. And I think that common sense is making a comeback. And people are like, I don't want a 17-page white paper on why I shouldn't get my 17th, or why I should get my 17th COVID shot. I'm just not going to get my 17th COVID shot. Whatever the scenario is. I don't need a foreign policy document from the American Enterprise Institute to know that bombing kids in either Israel or Gaza is a bad thing. I just know that's a bad thing. So I want to say another example of this that I thought that was really telling, and one that I witnessed personally. So this is actually hilarious because it connects to Douglas Murray. One of Douglas Murray's good friends is a gentleman by the name of Neil Ferguson, if you guys know who Neil Ferguson is. So Neil Ferguson, for those who don't know, is what Douglas Murray would call a quote-unquote actual historian. He's someone who is classically trained in history, and he knows facts or whatever. And so he is another one of the quote-unquote experts that Douglas Murray was referring to. And he is on the advisory board for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or ARC, which is Jordan Peterson's organization. It's kind of a counter worldwide economic forum. And I was at the ARC conference in London. I saw Neil Ferguson speak several times, give a keynote. He was on a couple panels. And, what I thought was amazing, and I think the biggest takeaway that I learned from being over there is that the European sense of America, like all of Europe wants to be America, but when it comes down to actually doing things that America does, they don't want to do anything. I think the cognitive dissonance there is just hysterical. I think it's so funny. I talked to my dad about this too. He travels far more than I do. He's in Europe a lot. He's actually worked for a British company for a long time, and so all of his superiors and the people that worked under him were mostly British. And he said the exact same thing. He's like, you just think that Europe is so in the toilet. They want to be in America, but they don't want to do the things that Americans do to be America, sort of thing. And so Neil Ferguson was giving a talk at the ARC conference, and he made a point about Doge. And so he was making a point about Doge, and Neil Ferguson is a neocon, so he is for every foreign intervention, every foreign war, all that sort of thing. And so he has cheer-led every conflict that has been huge inside of the world for the longest time, for the entirety of my life, for certain. All the wars in the Middle East, and he was really big on the war in Ukraine because he's of this kind of like post-Cold War, like Crusader, St. George and retirement syndrome thing is like, well, if Putin expands back to he's Scottish, so I don't even know how to do a Scottish accent, but if Putin goes back to the West one more inch, then we're going to reconstitute the Soviet. And I'm like, okay, like, I mean, fine, whatever. And so, but he made a point about Doge when Doge was really, really up and kicking. This is back in February. And so this is, I think, right as USAID was getting shut down and all those things. So while Doge, in his view, was apparently doing a quote-unquote great job, that the United States needs to spend more money on the military than what it currently is. And we have an over $800 billion military budget. And he made this point about like, well, whenever the military spending of a country is less than the debt, that we need to, that the country goes in decline. And so essentially, we need to combat the national debt, we just need to make more ballistic missiles to shoot people in Ukraine and Russia with, apparently. That was his argument. And so he used that to take a shot at America's quote-unquote negligence towards Ukraine. He used it to take a shot at Trump and a shot at J.D. Vance and a shot at all these people. And what I love a lot about the people that are currently in the Trump administration is they're not afraid to like get into it with people. Like they don't have like the political decorum. So JD, you can look this up. JD Vance took issue with this. And JD Vance just added he just took that clip from Neil Ferguson and quoted it and did like a 2,000 word response to it. It was awesome. And so JD just, again, he takes the nerd, he stuffs his head in the toilet, and he just puts Neil Ferguson through a wall. And he called it like moralistic garbage. He called Ferguson a globalist, both of which were true, because he essentially said, like, look, dude, you have shit the bed on every single one of these issues. You have not been right on a single gosh darn thing that you have done throughout your entire life. Like, you're wrong about everything. So why we're considering you an expert, I have no idea. And so he just basically told him, he's like, dude, sit back, sit down, shut up. Like, let the big boys come in and take care of this thing, because and essentially what he said is like, look, these people are unserious. These people are stupid. Their ideas have done nothing but stall out in midair and fail for generations. And then Neil Ferguson, who has never had anyone talk to him like that in the history of everything, because he's like a quote-unquote expert or whatever, he goes on Substack and writes this thing about like, in response to J.D. Vance or whatever he says. And he says all these things. And so he does what nerds do. He goes back and like writes a paper about like how offended he is that J.D. Vance called him out at his BS finally. And so I think this illustration, if piggybacking off the Dave Smith, Douglas Murray thing, and then going into the Neil Ferguson, J.D. Vance thing, the reason why elitism fails is inside of both of these arguments, both of these kerfuffles that we got into on social media. The reason why elitism fails is that it gets too high and mighty for itself. It's Icarus. It flies way too close to the sun. So it gets way, 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 way high up there. And then it gets way up there. It just can't see the ground anymore. It can't see the forest through the trees. And again, I'm going to bring this point up and I'm going to hammer it. And people hated that video when I made it about atheistic conservatism, because I'm going to hammer it again here. It is no surprise that the two men in both of these discussions, that Ferguson is an atheist and J.D. Vance is a Catholic. He is a Christian. Because the Bible is about common sense wisdom, not elevated elitism. In fact, the Bible hates elites. They hated the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the elites. They were the intellectual chattering class in the culture. And Jesus put them through a wall and stuffed their head in a toilet every single time that they try to take out Jesus. And again, going back to the Dave Smith, Douglas Murray thing, it is not a shock to me at all that Douglas Murray is an atheistic conservative and that Dave Smith is a Christian. It's not a surprise to me at all because the Bible is about common sense. It is about wisdom. It is not about intelligence. It is not about elitism. And this is why they cannot coexist, because elitism, for all of the quote-unquote conservatives out there, elitism is inherently a progressive concept. It's not conservative at all to be an elitist. Any elitist is not a conservative. They're a liberal or a libertarian or a progressive. Because to think that you are above a conversation, that you're above a person, that a person should, kowtow to you and your ideas, there's nothing more progressive than that. We saw this with everything with all the leftist craziness in America for the last decade. Because when you debase yourself, as Neil Ferguson did, as Douglas Murray did, as so many other people have done, from what is the truth and from what is common sense, you end up alienating everything that is constructive and positive about your philosophy on life, which is why elitism always fails. Elitism always fails because it believes that it can exist outside of the realm of common sense, which is a ridiculous idea. That's a ridiculous idea because common sense, gravity, the laws of physics, when you shoot someone in the head, they're probably going to die, all those types of things. You cannot think your way out of that scenario. You cannot think your way out of all of these things. You can't think your way out of wisdom. You can't think your way out of wisdom. Wisdom always beats intelligence every single time. It's the reason why, by the way, I'll throw myself on the spike here. Every time I've tried, I had a tweet about this or an X post, whatever we're calling it now, about this the other day. This is the reason why whenever I try to quote unquote outsmart or outthink my parents, I get slapped around by my parents. Not literally, my parents don't hit me. Even now I'm 27. If they hit me, that'd probably be a concern. But they slap me around with their wisdom because my parents are wise and I'm not. Am I smarter than I don't even think I'm smarter than my parents. I'm certainly not wiser than my parents. That's a completely stupid idea. That's a completely ridiculous idea to think on its face. So the reason that elitism will never outpace wisdom is that elitism isn't wise. It never is. Intelligence isn't wise. And the people that don't understand that are the people that are losing now. So we are going into, hopefully, an era that is defined by wisdom, not an era that is simply defined by elite intelligence. And I want to take a bit of a different transition here. So one of the most absurd lies we've been forced to swallow in recent years is it's okay to call people beautiful who aren't beautiful movement. And so I'm just going to go for this right here. So it's gotten so far crazy on one side of the equation here that we forgot that simple visual tactics matter. That, basically at the most fundamental levels, I want to use this as kind of a transition into one of the most fundamental things that we have seen swing back towards the side of sanity here. So one of the most absurd things that we have been forced to swallow in recent years is that we need to lower the standards of beauty to include people that are by not definition who are not by definition beautiful. So Jordan Peterson, for example. I think Jordan's actually a handsome guy, but Jordan Peterson got in trouble a couple years ago when they had the fat woman on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So Jordan Peterson goes on Twitter and says, this woman's not beautiful, which she wasn't. She had a pretty face, some people thought, but in terms of what men find attractive, men do not, for the most part, find fat women attractive. And this woman was fat, and she was wearing a swimsuit. And Sports Illustrated thought they could get away in their elitist line of thinking, which, by the way, the people who buy the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition are not the types of people that they are thinking about in their elitist circles. They're guys who probably drive an F-150, like a beer after work, etc. They do not want to see a fat woman thrown in their mailbox and said, hey, isn't this woman hot? And so Jordan Peterson did the sin, it's not a sin, but they did the quote-unquote sin of saying that this woman was not beautiful, which is what everybody thought. Why is this woman on the cover of Sports Illustrated? She shouldn't be. She's not big bone. She's fat. Can we just say that she's fat, etc.? And Jordan Peterson got roasted over this. And he got slapped around by everybody. How dare you not affirm this woman's obesity? Like, how dare you say that she's not going to die of like artery failure by the age of 57, whatever. And so, but now, I think honestly one of the most encouraging signs that the culture of common sense is coming back, that the culture of wisdom is coming back, is that hot people are now being celebrated again. We are now seeing a return of the hot person. We are seeing a return of the normal Victoria's Secret swimsuit edition. We are seeing a return to kind of the people who are stars in movies that are kind of being back inside of the traditional structure again. We are seeing a comeback to the normal standards of beauty that defined our culture for ever since human time, ever since the Garden of Eden was this defined. So this is very, very good news, because when hot people are celebrated again, it also means that a certain sense of shame is coming back to people who are trying to invert the standards to affirm themselves. So again, it's like the guy who drives the F-150 and likes a beer after work. He's just saying now, it's like, dude, don't tell me that this woman's beautiful. Like put Kate Upton on there. Like what are we doing here? Put Kate Upton. I want Kate Upton. I don't want Miss Piggy. Put Kate Upton on there. I don't want it. It might seem like a small thing, but it's not. Hot people are back, and I am all for it. I don't think it incredibly, I'm not a model by any stretch of the imagination. Hot people are coming back, and people are striving to get like them in all their various ways, I think is a very positive thing, and we should treat it as such. So again, and we're seeing this across our culture, the Trump cabinet, with the exception of Donald Trump, every person in that cabinet basically is a very attractive person. Every person in the Trump cabinet is hot. We are now having a campaign in the Trump administration, Make America Healthy Again. All the things about, hey, let's not be fat pieces of lazy garbage. Let's not do that. Let's eat actually good food, and let's exercise, and let's get vitamin D and sunlight and do all the things that we need to do. The types of models that we're seeing, there's no more fat mannequins in the stores. And if you are, you should walk out of that store, because that store isn't a serious store at all. And the things that we all see are a good sign. So beauty, the reason why this matters, beauty is a standard that has been existed since the baselines of our earliest scriptures, legends, poems. Like the Trojan War was started over beauty. Come on. Again, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? The Garden of Eden, the Bhagavad Gita, the Iliad, what I just said, all of these things. And the fact, we need to realize that the fact that this was inverted for a time being to appease people who are deliberately not that thing shows just how wild we went, how crazy, how bananas our culture went, and just how crazy the shift back has been. We went so far that we were saying that Lizzo twerking in a thong at a Lakers game should be celebrated. No. Not celebrated. Sit down, put pants on, and get on the treadmill and eat a Caesar salad. Please, without the dressing. Okay, hold the dressing, but eat the Caesar salad. Get some grilled chicken and protein in there. But regardless. So I believe that, again, this is not, people might think this is a small thing. I don't think this is a small thing at all. This serves as the most evident retribution and the rebuke to the elite nerd culture that we have, which is a very welcome sight. And there's an important truth in here that is shown as well. No matter how much you try to run away from it, I'll give them both credit here. Tyler, the Creator, and Gerard Carmichael, who kind of did the skit in this song on Igor, one of Tyler Creator's great albums. He has a song on that album, Tyler, the Creator does, and Gerard Carmichael does the song, that says, whatever you run from, you end up chasing. No matter how much you try, you can't avoid what you want to run into, which you can't avoid what you want, no matter how much you try. You cannot avoid the law of the universe that says the following. You can run from results and merit all you want. You can say that they're bigoted. You can say that it's like I'm like a white nationalist or something for wanting to have attractive women. And I don't look at the Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, by the way. But you can, run from that stuff all you want. You can, do whatever. But the values, the things that we have had in our culture for a long time, the wisdom that has adorned our culture for a long time, will always win every single argument that you have. It will win every time. You cannot run from it. It always wins. Doesn't matter if it's hot people in magazines. Doesn't matter if it's Douglas Murray or Dave Smith. Doesn't matter if it's Neil Ferguson and J.D. Vance. Wisdom will always beat intelligence because wisdom has undergone the test of time. Knowledge, book smarts, change every time there's a new textbook printed. Wisdom is what wins things. This is why history is so important. This is why you should listen to historians. By the way, Darryl Cooper is the historian. Listen to Darryl Cooper. Listen to Victor Davis Hanson. Listen to Neil Ferguson. I'm not even against listening to Neil Ferguson. But study history. Study where we have been. Study. This is why you should not avoid reading classic literature if you like reading. Read the great writings of the early 20th century. Read the novels that have been considered the great American novel. Read these things. Study these things because there is wisdom in those things. If it were true back in the Anglican era of England, if it were true when F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote East of Eden, if it were true, that's John Steinbeck, no, is that John Steinbeck? It's one of the two. Great Gatsby, I shouldn't have just went away from my Gatsby reference. Great Gatsby is my favorite novel, by the way. But if it was true in The Great Gatsby, it's true now. If it was true back then, it was true now. That is where wisdom comes in. Intelligence matters very little when wisdom is involved. Strive to be wise. Don't strive to be intelligent. And I think for a very roundabout example, hot people being back in is a good example of why wisdom is returning to our culture. And so as we close here, I want to talk about a little bit of the thing that I mentioned earlier in my opening monologue that I think is relevant here, and that's about men. And I think that I made a point about, masculinity inside of the part where I talked about Jonah Hill and Michael Cera. And by the way, I have nothing against, I think Michael Cera is so funny. I think Jonah Hill mostly seems like a pretty nice guy. I know he's had a couple issues and he's kind of a bizarre person. All actors kind of are bizarre people, but nothing against Jonah Hill or Michael Cera at all. Because, again, Superbad is the funniest movie I think ever made. I watch that movie all the time. I love those guys. But there is a factor about masculinity here that I think we're missing. And I think it is men that have the most to gain from this vibe shift, from the fall of the nerd class, from getting away from the experts, the elitist class. And I think men can really benefit from this and how we can use this to go forward and move into the positive era of the vibe shift culture. So I think this is going to come out next week. So we are almost at the midway point of 2025. So I think that this, for some people who are out there, this can be a way for men to win the rest of the year, to have an attitude and a perspective that can win throughout the rest of 2025 and beyond, hopefully. And so the culture is shifting from simple talk and intelligence towards, again, wisdom. And wisdom, if done right, begets action. When you get exposed to wisdom in a certain area of your life, you should act upon that wisdom. Whether it's a talk with an older mentor in your life, whether it's reading a great classic novel, whether it's studying a historical event, whatever, it should change the way you think about something. It should change something about yourself. We are moving towards activation, merit, doing something. And men, traditionally, have gotten the most benefit while being activated, while achieving things that are merit-based, that are doing something. Not saying that women can't either, but men have a unique positioning inside of this. And I think we would be wise to take advantage of it. So our culture undoubtedly has been feminized due to the nerd and elite vibe shift. We have gone away from tradition, where men have thrived, and into this kind of cultural progressivism where men have kind of found alienation, they don't know their place, etc. inside of it. And again, this is a good thing in some ways, such as women getting more elevated, having more opportunities, but we need to have an equal conversation here. This has undoubtedly left men to be stranded. Men don't know what to do nowadays. You don't know what a man is nowadays. And Matt Walsh made that film a couple years ago about what is a woman. We don't know what a man is today. We don't have a definition for it. We have blown up the definition of masculinity. Our culture has. And now men are struggling because of it in various ways. These are men of all ages, men of all ethnicities. It doesn't matter. So we find ourselves without a place to be. And in the middle of this kind of awkward and weird transition period in history where, we haven't found a way of progressing that has benefited men, which is a problem. Because again, I want equality for everybody, and that includes men. Men have been really, really hurt in this last 20-year period, in this whole nerd class era, this 20, 30-year period. Men are suffering now. It's the reason why I wrote a book on it. It's the reason why I talk about it so much. I think a culture that leaves behind men is making a very, very critical error, a very critical error. And so we now need to use this vibe shift towards the wise elements of our culture and away from the intellectualized elite circles in our culture to have men win. So now that the culture is shifting back towards common sense, towards tradition, men can find a definition for it. However, this is the key. What has happened is that many men have adopted the posture of our elites and our nerd class by outsourcing the traditional values of masculinity towards things outside of themselves. Meaning, men have become more self-imposed victims today than any time before this. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop. There have been no more times, or no greater time in history, where men have anointed themselves as a victim. Oh, the culture did this to me. Modern women don't like this. No one wants to hire me for my labor, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Is some of it true? Maybe. Is all of it true? Definitely not. You have agency. You have activation. You have merit. You have to go out and get skills to get where you want to be inside of your life. Regardless of the circumstances. Being a man is hard. Being a woman is hard. Being a man is hard. It's hard. So you can either wallow in that or you can get over it. Unfortunately, too many men have not gotten over it. Instead, they've done the exact opposite. They have said that I am a man and I am a victim. No. That's not how this works. That is not how this works. I promise you. If you are a man, truly, if you call yourself a man, there's no way you can call yourself a victim at the same time. There's no way you can adopt that mentality. It needs to stop. If we are wanting to have men have a place in the world today, which is changing, we're not going to change it back, even though some of it's shifting. It's not going to totally change back to the way it was. We just need to abandon that right off the top. But if we are going to reclaim masculinity, if men are going to win, we need to turn the page on our culture's victimizing of us, and instead move towards a point where we can make ourselves the solution to our own problems. We need to turn the page. We need to move on. And we need to move towards a point where we make ourselves into the solution that we desire. No one is going to save you as a man. No one's going to save you. It's not going to happen. The men who are successful, the ones who will navigate this shift out of self-imposed victimhood, will be the ones that win. And the ones that don't will not. It's that simple. It's that simple. If you are a man and watching this, and you want to get better, be the guarantee for yourself. Be the solution for yourself. Activate yourself. Do something. Don't take a trip to Europe. Don't take a trip to Bali. Don't say that, this person screwed me over. None of that. None of that. Be the solution to your own problem. No one's going to do it for you. No one will do it for you. I promise that. Be the solution to your own problem. You can win, but you have to be the person that wins the game for you. Don't count on somebody else. Count on yourself. Revenge of the Nerds, it's over, but you have to be the one that steps up to reclaim your place if you want it. Because someone else will. I will. A lot of men I know will be. If you want to be one, there's more than enough room for everybody. But if you're left in your own squalor, no reason to be there but your own. Thanks for watching, everyone. Own the day. Open your mind. See you next week.